Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. Hey, if you wouldn't mind doing so, if you haven't already, could you please subscribe to the podcast? It's on Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, 30 different channels, so you can get to take your pick there. And while you're out there doing that, go to globalinvestoragent.com. This is a website we created to showcase all the investor agents around the country that are trained to work with you and I as investors. They're business people. Often they're smart. They're smarter than your average agent. They're business owners, and they know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals for you and I. Okay, so keep that in mind. And in the meantime, though, we got a great guest today. Scotty Milas from Massachusetts, a beautiful, historically significant state, near and dear to my heart. So one of my sisters used to live up there. But Scotty, thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad to have you on board, and we're glad to hear about franchising and how that can be an alternative investment, another investment vehicle for all of our listeners.
It's great to be here, Gary, and I'm looking forward to having a nice conversation with you. And I'm a believer in franchising, the entrepreneur, and how real estate can also tie into owning a franchise and kind of tying that all in.
Yeah. What's amazing is, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I've obviously done a lot of real estate investing, but I've also owned 7 businesses, or I own one now, but I've owned 7. And, of course, I've sold or merged to prior 6. And a lot of people who invest in real estate are also business owners. Dentists who own their own dental practice, sometimes multiple offices, engineering, graduates who start a consulting business. It goes on and on. And when they realize how powerful franchising is, they will often start to buy franchises. So let's do this. This is an excellent topic and certainly matches our audience. Would you mind, though, giving everybody just a little bit of a background? Let them know a little bit about who Scotty really is,
Hey, no, absolutely. I kind of look at myself. I love my story, and I love everybody else's story. And I think we all have a story. And of course, I have one too. And grew up in Long Island, Huntington, New York, and grew up on the water racing sailboats, and actually started making pizzas when I was 8, 9 years old for an Italian family. The owner of the company the owner of the store was actually my Little League coach, and there were 4 brothers. Mm-hmm. We grew up together playing baseball and making pizzas, and I fell in love with the pizza industry. And I always wanted a pizzeria, and that was always my goal. And of course, my parents had other thoughts for me, higher education. But long story short, I've owned a number of businesses. I've worked for people. I helped build a franchise company, a brand. I was an integral part of the management team and heading up U.S. development, kind of helping put it on the map. I basically took all of my entrepreneur lessons that I've learned, even the ones that I failed. And many years ago, it seems like a lifetime, I started a consulting practice and really just helping people research and explore business ownership. Franchising is not for everybody. So what I like to do is really develop that trust with my clients, build that roadmap, that navigation, and then being able to introduce them to the brands that fit and help them through the validation process, making sure that they're making a validated decision and not an emotional decision.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And by the way, you mentioned something near and dear to my heart. I'm basically a data guy. I love to learn. I love to research and do analysis. But you mentioned the word research the right franchise, or the phrase. So what are some of the essential steps for somebody? I mean, just to give it paint a picture here, I know people who own franchises in real estate that aren't even real estate people. It's just because they look at the model, and when they see the right model, they know it makes sense for them. But can you shed some light on that first part? Like, what are the essential steps for researching the right franchise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I've broken it down into 2 components, or at least initial components, kind of a phrase I came up with. It's what's your know and know your why. Understanding you is very important yourself in the direction you go to explore franchise opportunities, even business ownership. Waking up in the morning, if you've been in corporate America for 25, 30 years and deciding that you just don't like your boss isn't necessarily a reason that you're going to go out and invest in a franchise or start your own business. Mm-hmm. So understanding who you are, the short-term gain, the game, the startup, and of course, more importantly, the end game, what's your exit strategy? All those things are important in deciding what direction, category of different types of brands that you would want to look at. People like yourself may be interested in the real estate play. So what brands would fit into owning the real estate? I am a firm believer that if you can own the real estate and own the business, you're way ahead of the game, because the end game could be you sell the business, but you still own the real estate. If you don't own the real estate and you sell the business, well, you're back to square one, then starting again. So it's really understanding what you know, and understanding why you want to do this. I think those are important features. Anybody can go online and start searching for a franchise. I have clients that call me up and say, hey, can you just send me a list? Well, you don't need me to send you a list. You can do that yourself. So breaking down the components, the steps, the process, understanding who you are, your why really helps in the research and exploring the right opportunity. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I'm imagining that there's franchise opportunities in almost every business sector. So when it comes to like knowing yourself and trying to figure out what franchise you want, I'm guessing it's just as important to know your personality's profile. In other words, are you a very analytical person, or you're more of an alpha type driver type person who just wants to hit the gas and go, or are you more of a social person who loves the interaction and the social aspect of things? How important is that? And then the second part of that's a two-part question. That's the first part. So the first part is based on you and your tendencies. The second part is based on the availability of the franchises in the different sectors. Are there certain sectors that would be good for, like there's certain people that should just do franchise, or restaurant franchises, and there's other people maybe should just do, I'm not sure what the terms are, but spas, like aesthetic surgery and things like that. I'm probably not saying it right, but cosmetic surgery, things like that. So is there any validity to that yes, it should be lined up based on your profile, and also be lined up based on the business sector? I mean, if I'm way off base, this is all, we're all friends here. So Scotty, you can pick me apart.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, and I think that's an important question. And, look, there are all the standard variables that go into your search. Obviously, your investment level, your net worth, your cash, what would you qualify for funding if you're going to go that? All that's relevant. But what you just asked is probably more important than all of those factors. The first part, or at least the question that I ask my clients and direct is, to get in, and we have a dialogue on is, do you have a sales aptitude? Because, and I'm not talking about the Willy Loman Death of a Salesman, where you're knocking on doors and, you got the white pages or the yellow pages open and you're dialing for dollars. Are you the type of person that can go out and network with people, whether it's a chamber event, doing something like a podcast, making a boardroom presentation, going to a homeowner? Or are you the type of person that really is not comfortable in that position, but want to sit back and watch the people come in and really kind of delegate the process or how the system works? You mentioned restaurants. That would be an example of a type of business where someone who doesn't have that sales aptitude, they're going to rely on that social media marketing aspect, and the people are going to come in word of mouth. So understanding what you like to do and what you don't like to do, and I think it's safe to say, Gary, and you probably know this as a business owner, owning your own business doesn't necessarily mean that everything that the business offers you're going to love to do. You're still going to have to rely on people to help you out run the business. Delegate. Franchisors, the people that own the brands, don't want people making the pizza or flipping the burgers. Yeah, you can jump in every once in a while, but they want the entrepreneur person who's going to provide oversight, somebody who's going to look at the numbers, the analytical part, like you mentioned. So that's to me is the deeper dive into the business model that people will look at. I mean, it's just a very important part of the process, understanding your sales aptitude if you have one. Yeah. And I've had clients say, Scott, no, I don't like getting out there. I don't like making presentations. So then we have to start looking at business models that are more of the service based, where people are coming to you, that retail, and go from there.
Yeah. Okay. That helps a lot. And I think a lot of people listening are thinking, now it's in other words, everybody's looking for the first step. But to me, the first step is really knowing what your baseline is versus what we just talked about, is what I would consider baseline type analysis, which is focus on yourself first and what, what would be a good match for you. So going back to you, if you wouldn't mind, maybe a great success or maybe a failure that, at the time was painful, but you learned a great lesson from it. So back in the beginning, what was your first experience with franchising? And if you don't mind sharing, some of the one of the glory days, and then sharing one of the days where you're like, boy, I can't wait for this day to be over.
Well, it's interesting. My first experience in understanding a franchise was the middle of my sophomore year, when I came home from college with all my bags, and my father said to me, well, what are you doing? And I said, I quit. I'm done. I just, it's just education wasn't for me. I was the kind of guy, you put your hand on the oven, it was hot, you're going to check the oven again before you put your hand on the oven. Yeah. And my father kind of looked at me and said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I have an opportunity to be a partner in a pizzeria, something I loved and to do. And I'd like to know if I can borrow $20,000. Now, to be sensitive to the people that are listening to this, I won't exactly tell you what my father or how my father responded. But my father said to me, basically, your rent starts 2 weeks from today, the first of the month. And no, I'm not giving you the $20,000 or lending it to you. However, if you're interested in this, quote, food stuff, I would like you to go to the McDonald's School of Management. Now, I was like, of course I knew what McDonald's was, but I didn't understand the concept of what franchising was. And my father tried to explain it to me and everything. And I had been to McDonald's and, they had the funny little hats on and, and I just said, Dad, that's not for me. I want pizza. He says, but you have no aspect of how to run a business. He says, you got to get that experience, and the McDonald's School of Management will. Well, I started to do some research, and, that took me into opening a landscaping business, starting to mow lawns, raking leaves, painting houses, just little different things that got me into that entrepreneur thing. And then eventually I managed to work my way into sales positions, managing budgets. But my experience with franchising really came about helping a friend of mine's son open a pizzeria, and his brother was starting a burger concept. And the brother would be coming into the pizza store every once in a while and started talking. And he said, hey, Scott, I would really like you. He said, hey, Scotty, I really would like you to come work for me. Once this whole thing is over for you. And that's really how I got into it. And, there's some innuendos and funny things that happened along the way to eventually get into franchising. But I started to learn about franchising, and this is many, many moons ago. And I started to learn about franchising and understanding about how franchisors set up the systems, and that you're buying the system, you're buying the menu, the best practices. And to be successful in franchising, you have to understand or be able to manage the systems and delegate it, not necessarily do it all yourself, but being able to teach it and follow it. I always tell people that, look, if you want to wake up in the morning and make a pot of soup, if you own a McDonald's franchise, that's not going to work. It's just not going to happen. So it's following the system and the process. And that's why franchises have done well, really, with people that don't necessarily have industry experience, because they can train somebody the right way versus somebody coming in with bad habits.
Yeah. It's interesting. I remember when I built my first business, I really learned a valuable lesson. And it's this. And this is for everybody listening here that has not started a business, but you're thinking about starting a business, you're dreaming about it, you want to do it. You're going to have two sets of skills. One set of skills is the skills related to the product or service you're offering. You're an expert at pizza, for example. All right. But the other set of skills is the skills of feeling, thinking, speaking, acting like a business person, and really mastering, income, expense, asset and loss, profit, liabilities, there's inventory, human resources, payroll, tax prep, all this stuff. It's all important. And you have to develop those skills too. So you're really having to be a master of two different things: the product or service you're offering, and the business of being in business. So,
absolutely. I call those, some of the things that you mentioned, I call the what ifs. What if this happens, or what happens if this piece of equipment breaks down, or what if the employee doesn't show up? I mean, those are things as a business owner you have to prepare for and be able to work or rely on people to get those problems solved. A common misnomer about franchising is that, and I get this question at least twice, 2-3 times a week, is people ask me, my potential client will ask me, well, what's the franchise going to do for me? Are they going to get me clients? Well, the answer to that question is no, they're not going to go out and get you clients. Now, they're going to help you with the marketing strategies because that's their responsibility. They have marketing departments, but you're still going to have to go out and build your business, whether it's retail or service-based, and go out and get your clients into your store, or go to meet clients. So, I call it the what ifs. It's being prepared for the worst. Yeah. But enjoy the success.
Yeah. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book, Global Investor Agent, is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience, and it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders. Some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklists to follow to not just survive, but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation, 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show. Absolutely. I will tell you, without going into all the gory details, early on, one of my first businesses, it was actually the second business I built, and had this person working for me from day one that I almost probably within a few months of me starting. She was my first hire. Part-time, eventually built her up to full-time, gradually gave her more and more responsibility till eventually she was literally managing things for me. And she was with me for 14 years. And I decided, well, hey, I can go ahead and I'm going to, semi-retire and move back to Virginia Beach. And I'll come back every now and then just to visit and say hi and collect my money. And one of my good friends, he helped franchise a large company his dad built to 650 franchises. So this was a big deal internationally. Wow. And I would love to give you his name and the name of the company. You'd probably recognize it, but I know we're being recorded. I don't know what the laws are about that, so I'll refrain from that. But what he told me was, and I told him what I was doing. He said, Gary, and he looked at me and he said, your business is going to suffer, and I just, I should have allowed it to hit me more, but I didn't. So I went away, and then within probably a half a year, the business was starting to really suffer. And she'd hired somebody, and ultimately the end game was there was some embezzlement going on, and I had to sell the company, and I had to move back to where I was to clean up all this mess. And it taught me a valuable lesson: is I really have to learn to be a business person. And one of those rules was in being a business is separation of duties. Like the person that writes the checks cannot be the same person who's making the deposits and things like that. Now I know those things, and I don't care how fat, busy I get, how much I trust somebody and like somebody. There are certain things that you have to separate duties, the critical functions. And it's, again, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. I know that, but for everybody listening, just know this: all the skills you're going to learn and develop. And I definitely want you to follow up with Scotty after this, because I've spoke to him before this. I've read about him, and he's somebody you can trust. But listen to these kind of sage words of wisdom, because the times that I did, I succeeded. The times that I didn't, I failed. And that was one of those times. So I want to share that, not to scare you, the listener, but to make sure you don't repeat the same thing I did. It's one thing to give up responsibility, but it's another thing to give up control. And I gave up control and responsibility, and I paid for it. So, in any case, enough of that gloom and doom stuff. Let's talk about some happy stuff. So, what can you share in the way of like resources? And there's so many questions I have, Scotty. I'm interested in like timing, because here we are in this economy. Is it going to go down? Are rates going to keep going up, or what are we doing? And then in kind of geography, like big city versus small town. So let's just take it one step at a time. Is there a business sector right now where you would say, hey, based area on the economy, this might be a good model to get a good franchise on to get into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We call those recession resistant. Of course, the new term is essential businesses, and that obviously came from the recent pandemic that we went through. Businesses that were allowed to stay open. I mean, that's a whole nother subject, but I call them recession and technology resistant type businesses. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of categories. Not a lot, but there are categories that fit into that. The pet industry is one. What is it? 7 out of 10 homes today have not only one pet, but they have 2 pets.
Wow.
The hair industry, and I'm not talking about a high-end beauty parlor, but your simple place where you go get a haircut. People need a haircut. People need to feed their pets. They need to take care of their pets. So those industries, the other one is laundromats. I mean, people need clean clothes. The way people are working today, 10, 12 hours a day, they don't want to be involved or have the time to wash their clothes. So they want to drop it off. So high-tech laundromat are pretty popular. Okay. So those are several categories. There are several subcategories to those categories. Even brands that will allow you to own the real estate within that category. I'm working with a brand right now that has that I've worked very closely with and done a lot of placements with. That they're in the cosmetology space, but what we do is we take 4,000 or 5,000 square feet and we build out 36 to 40 different suites, and cosmetologists who are looking to start their own business rent out these suites versus going out and doing a long-term 10-year lease. So I have a gentleman down in Florida that just bought 5 of them for his family. And, he's going to own the real estate. They're real estate players, laundromats, pets. There are many components to pets. So those are some of the industries, automobiles, anything in automobiles.
Yeah.
People say, well, hey, wait a minute, electric cars. Well, gasoline cars and diesel cars are not just going to disappear. I mean, those, so they still got to be maintained. And believe it or not, electric cars still need new tires. They need new brakes. They need windshield wipers. They get their windshield chip. So those are some of the categories that I consider to be technology resistant and recession resistant type industries. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And by the way, something else you shared, you mentioned it twice now, is owning the real estate that the business is in. And over the years, it's just one of those coincidence kind of things. It wasn't like I was an expert in the restaurant business. I just happen to know a good number of people in the restaurant business, some independent owners and some franchise owners. And it's almost uncanny that there's a dividing line between success and failure. And it's related to, or maybe directly or indirectly related to, the ownership. So in other words, the companies, the restaurants that own the building and land, and sometimes they rent out additional space. They'd have, whatever, apartments upstairs or office space that they would rent out to other people in their restaurants downstairs. But there's some exceptions, but almost to a T, Scotty, the folks that own the building and the land with the restaurant always fared better than the ones that did. And all I know is that their costs were locked in. They weren't getting rent increases every year, and they always had residual income coming in. If they sold the restaurant business, they still got the land in the building, you know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is part of an exit strategy that I talk to my clients that are interested in eventually the real estate play. And that's not to say that you go out and buy a franchise, invest in a franchise, and then your first location, you own the real estate. You may want to get one up and running, get the lay of the land, be successful. And then as you expand in multiple locations, but the exit strategy for someone who owns the real estate and the business is you can sell the business, but still own the real estate and collect the rent for owning the real estate. So, but you're absolutely right. When you own the real estate, if sales are a little bit slow, a big snowstorm, if you want to pay yourself a little bit less rent, as long as you're covering the mortgage, you can. So, I mean, the exit strategy and the variables are in play to own the real estate and the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, if we could, I don't know how much geography plays into this, but I know that in basic commercial real estate, you look at what's called foot traffic and automobile traffic, and it's done in centrifugal bands. Like there's an inner circle, the mile closest to the business, then you go 5 miles out, then you go 10 miles out, what have you. That's all important. But is there any pattern that you can determine in franchises between large cities and like tertiary or third tier, small towns? And the reason I'm asking is I've taught classes in over 600 cities and towns in the U.S. And I love the big city. I love New York. I love Chicago, for periods of time. But there's something about those small towns. There's fewer restaurants, of course, and things like that. But it seems to me like people out there are doing quite well. And they can set up shop like a dentist. I know a dentist that owns several practices, and he does own the building and the land too, by the way, for those different practices. And he just goes out to these outlying areas, the tertiary towns, and cleans up because everybody else is in the big city. So is there any rhyme or reason to that, or is it just certain business sectors?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we call that the territory check. Obviously, as I start preparing to introduce brands, the brands that I introduce to people, I've done territory checks. I've looked at, the demographics. I've talked to the franchisor about the locations, the interested territories that we're interested in. Because the last thing I want to do as a consultant is present the brand to somebody, get them all excited, and the brand says, you know what, we don't want to go there. I mean, again, it doesn't make sense. But I tell a funny story about my days when I was helping build this food concept, this burger concept. And I had a gentleman from Wyoming call me. Let's just say it was on a major route out towards Sturgis for Sturgis Bike Week.
Okay.
And this gentleman kept calling me and saying, I have a great location, a piece of property. I've been to your stores. I love the food. I want one. And I just kept saying, no, that location won't work. He begged me to come out and meet with him. Let me just show you. Well, long story short, he came out. Interesting kind of guy, young kid. He had his family. They owned some property. They owned a gas station. And next to him, he wanted to put the burger joint. And he came out and he showed up in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, and he had a little food stain on his T-shirt. And it's kind of funny, you kind of look at them, and he proceeded to show me what you exactly just mentioned, all the demographics, the traffic counts, the cars that go by one way, the other way, Sturgis Bike Week. And sure enough, we finally, after a year and a half of him begging, we finally awarded him a franchise, and he ended up being one of the top franchises in the system. And, sometimes you just have to dig a little deeper into the territory. But to answer your question, there are certain brands that fit better in certain demographics than others. As you probably know, the closer you get to New York City or Chicago or LA, the cost of the rent, if you're not owning the real estate, is going to be a lot higher. So all that has to go into your P&L, your business P&L, that your business plan that you're putting together. So as I said, I like to do that initial work up front for my clients. Franchisors are always looking for people, at least in their first location, to be within 30, 45 minutes at most of where they live. in the event that they have to get to the business. But as you expand and you hire people to help run the businesses, then you can get further out.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned the word brand a couple of times here, and I'm realizing there's, take like Subway. There's Quiznos, Subway. What's the Jersey Mike's?
Jersey Mike's, yep.
So when it comes to similar brands, is there any kind of a science or a couple of tricks to the trade where you're comparing similar brands? Like how do you know it's better to get a Jersey Mike's versus a Subway, for example?
Somebody asked me once, well, not once, but they asked me quite a bit. Hey, I don't want to go into that market, or I want to go into that category because it's saturated. So, for example, somebody who wants to get into the sandwich business, because you brought up sandwich. And my response is that there's a reason why there are a lot of franchise companies that are doing sandwiches, is because it pleases the masses. You have a mass audience versus a selective audience. Mm-hmm. So what it boils down to then is finding the brand, the company that you're comfortable with. It's like dating. It's, how long did it take you to really get to know your future spouse and eventually your wife, your husband, or whatever it may be, your significant other. So you're going to date. So the distinguishing point isn't so much the validation on the numbers. It's the validation on, are you comfortable with the support and the people that you're going to be working with? Mm-hmm. In franchising, there are no secrets. So you have to be able to get along with the people that you're partnering with. You may not agree all the time, but you got to be able to get along and work things out in times of disagreements. Yeah. So that's how I would tell you to differentiate between a McDonald's and a Burger King, for example. Okay. You may like the people more at McDonald's than you do at Burger King, and vice versa. Yeah. So that's the best way. That's why it's important when you're looking at a franchise to get out to the corporate office, meet the people that are going to support you. Talk to the real estate department, talk to the marketing department, the operations team. If you're not comfortable with them, or you just don't like them, that's a good enough reason to move in a different direction and maybe look at another brand in that category.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I tell you what, I know we're probably just going over a little bit on time, and I apologize, listeners, but this has been a really good podcast. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm happy to go along, but maybe what I want to do is, Scotty, you definitely demonstrate, knowledge and authority in this business here. If someone wants to speak with you or consult with you because they've thought about it, they've done some research, or like, okay, I need to talk to somebody. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can email me, Scott, SCOTT, not Scotty, Scott, SCOTT. at Scott Milas, and Milas is M as in Mark, I, L as in Larry, A as in Apple, S as in Sam. Scott at scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. You can go to my website, fill out the inquiry form, scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Scott Milas, SCOTTMILAS. Message me on LinkedIn. But yeah, certainly, I'm a big fan of franchising. Okay. I always tell my clients, remember, it's always about you and shouldn't be anything about anybody else. And it's okay to say no.
Yeah. I agree. Well, I appreciate that. And everybody listening, if you could please leave a review. That's what makes the world of podcasts go around. There's no money exchanges hands. I mean, we pay for putting on the podcast, but it doesn't cost anything to you, the listener. I don't pay Scotty. Scotty doesn't pay me. So, but what makes it work is your review. So we really appreciate leaving reviews out there. And this has been an exceptionally good one. And so if you could do that, because remember, guys, most people in real estate are already business people. They're entrepreneurs, whether they know it or not. They're already entrepreneurs. And you really owe it to yourself to not have all your eggs in one basket. And if you're going to do a franchise, maybe look for one where if they encourage you to own the property too. Now you're knocking out two birds in one stone, Yeah. So, one
last point, Gary, just so you know, I just want to make sure that that your listening audience, the people that would be interested, know that the services that I provide, the education, the guidance, the research, are absolutely at no cost to them. They will never receive an invoice from me. I am compensated by the brands that I represent, over 500 in many different categories. Like I said, this is all about them. And if they decide at any point that it's not for them, that I'd rather them find out now and exit versus after they made the investment and, lose out on an investment that they made.
Well, I love that model. I call it pay for performance, which is exactly how I run my business. I don't, I have this large national team of real estate agents who focus on investors, and we teach them to invest themselves too. And the cool thing is they're shocked by it when they realize they don't have to pay me a dime up front. I mean, when they earn commissions, I take a portion of that, but it's a small portion. The key is networking and growth. And we start with education, we follow up with information, then we take meaningful action, and that's how we get results. So guys, it sounds like Scotty's are the same character. And if you could just remember Scott, SCOTT at Scott Milas, MILAS, franchisecoach.com. And of course, the website is scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. And now you've got no reason to not call. There's no risk, which is what I like.
Right.
We take the risk, So, but in any case, while you're out there, do that. And then please go to globalinvestoragent.com. If you're an agent, click on the Learn More button, because this economy is changing. You'd be crazy not to learn how to take these investors under your belt the right way. People like that we're talking about today. These are people with money. That's who you need to work with. Okay, so in any case, everybody take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families, and we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.